Hey everybody, welcome to ABC News Live. In the briefing room, I'm ABC's Devin Dwyer. Great to have you with us on this Friday of a holiday weekend. We are tracking Hurricane Dorian at this hour as it stares down 17 million Americans who are on alert in its path. It is getting stronger. The National Hurricane Center now saying that the storm has reached Category 3 status. That means it has 115-mile-an-hour sustained winds. By the time it hits the U.S. coast, it is expected to be much stronger. The big question now is where it will hit and when it will hit. And for the latest on that, I want to bring in now Ken Graham. He's the director of the National Hurricane Center, been tracking this storm from the start. Ken, great to see you. The storm appears to be moving very, very slowly as it approaches the coast.
Yeah, that's one of the problems that we have. I mean, we got some strengthening in the hurricane on satellite looking, more like the structure that we would expect from a hurricane. But look at the movement, just really slow. And then later on in the forecast, I mean, these are points 24 hours apart, so very slow movement. So still some uncertainty, but it looks like we're going to have some rain. It looks like we're going to have prolonged winds. And of course, those winds. I mean, you talk about a Category 4, it's 140 miles an hour. So significant impacts on the way.
And that would be the strongest storm to hit Florida since Hurricane Andrew in 1992. What concerns you the most about this one?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just really trying to watch for those impacts. So you're going to have that wind, but the slow movement really doesn't help here either, because it's not just going to be the wind. The slower we move, the more rain we can get as well. Look at some of these rainfall totals with the slow movement, 6 to 10 inches in some places, maybe even 10 to 15 or more. So all aspects, the storm surge, you're going to have the rain, and we were trying to do some calculations with the storm surge. We're going to run some models overnight and tomorrow. Some of the storm surge values, we could be seeing 10 foot or greater.
And Ken, while the science has gotten very good at predicting these things, there's obviously always a bit of ambiguity in there. Can you talk about what some of the factors are that could determine whether this storm actually takes a path straight up the Florida peninsula or whether it sort of grazes the coast instead?
Yeah, we've had all those solutions in the models, and that's why we try to blend those together. We never really use one track in the models. We use ensembles, so each model's got multiple different tracks, and we blend those together to get, pretty much a better picture is what we try to do. So yeah, we have those solutions, but if you notice, this is what happens. Every time I've seen these over the last 25 years, these hurricanes, when you make that turn, in this case a right turn, they slow down, and that's what we have here. So some of the variables are really in this cone. So 2/3 of the time, you could see the center anywhere inside this cone. That's based on our error over the last 5 years. So that is a possible solution, but this is important. Even if it does do that, you're still going to have some of those impacts with the winds. We're not just right around the center, but even the tropical storm force winds extend, 105 miles away from the center.
And real quickly, Ken, at this hour at least, we're still expecting the eye of the storm to make landfall there, what, about early Tuesday morning?
Yeah, it looks like we're getting into early Tuesday, but here's the big thing to remember. Tropical storm force winds could actually reach the coast. And you're talking about Monday morning, overnight Sunday, you can still start seeing the effects of this system.
All right, so we have some time to go. Ken, thank you so much from the National Hurricane Center tracking this all the way. A short time ago, I also spoke with one of the top officials here in Washington preparing the federal response to the storm after it hits, David Bebo, the Deputy Associate Administrator at FEMA, and I asked him how they are preparing. Mr. Bebo, the Deputy Administrator, said yesterday in an interview that he is expecting significant infrastructure damage from this storm. We're talking about roads, power outages, and the like. How far inland are you expecting to see that significant damage?
Well, we pay very close attention to all sorts of infrastructure that are critical to stabilizing what we call the community lifelines. The lifelines are those things that can be the difference between stabilization and continued instability after a storm. Roads are critical to get crews to where help may be needed, to move food and water and tarps and other supplies. And so getting roads back open after the storm clears is going to be really important. Getting search and rescue crews into affected areas to do the primary and secondary searches is going to be really important. And we are taking very aggressive steps now to pre-position resources in the potential area of impact so that we can help support Governor DeSantis and his team in those life-saving and life-sustaining missions that we expect may be required.
Is FEMA doing anything on that front to help make sure that gas keeps flowing after the storm passes?
Well, federal departments and agencies have been working together for days to prepare for Dorian. You can see behind me the National Response Coordination Center. We have our partners from the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation here with us. They have provided some regulatory relief that allows truckers to stay on the roads longer and try to get those gas stations resupplied.
Just ahead of this storm, saw so many headlines in the papers about this transfer of funds from FEMA, more than $100 million to some immigration initiatives by the administration. Can you confidently say that none of that money will be needed this hurricane season? Is this something that won't pose a problem for your work?
FEMA's Disaster Relief Fund is in a strong position today. We are not being shy about taking important steps to get resources out the door. We have the resources we need to position our assets to support the governor's team for life-saving and life-sustaining operations, and that's our focus right now.
And let's go to Stuart, Florida now, about 40 miles north of West Palm, right in the heart of that target zone that the National Hurricane Center says could be where this storm comes ashore. That's where we find our next guest, Dorian Vogley, who is a local resident there, been helping his mom get ready for the storm as well. Dorian, thanks so much for taking a break and joining us live. Wanted to ask how you're preparing. How are you feeling about this? Are you worried about Dorian?
I've been putting up shutters. People around my community and my neighborhood are putting up shutters. We're all helping each other out. Went to the store and got some food and water and all that stuff. I mean, we're worried. I mean, we're more being cautious than anything. It's not our first time. I've been in Florida since like 1990. So, we've been through these things before. You just, put your head down and get the things that you need and move on. We can't really worry too much about it because it's coming no matter what. But as long as we're prepared, we're going to be good.
As you stockpile, Darren, when you go to the store, and we're seeing some pictures there of shelves being emptied out, how many days do you prepare for? And how much water, how much food do you stockpile at home?
I would say prepare for about 4 to 5 days. Have enough, stuff that you can get by without needing any electricity. Canned soup, things like that. Simple stuff. But we really do prepare for it, and that 4 or 5 days is usually about the amount of time we get our electricity back. That we had a lot of hardening in our systems with our electricity and all that. So once we lose the power, we typically get it back pretty quickly.
And do I gather correctly, Darren, from everything that you're saying, that you don't plan to evacuate even if this ends up being a Category 4 storm?
No, we're in a flood zone. My house is concrete block, which is, a superior building material to the wood that you typically see. So my house is built for up to 180 to 190 mile an hour wind. So we're good. I'm ready to go, and our houses are built to sustain this kind of stuff, and I'm not in a flood zone, so no reason to leave.
All right, you're confident, Dorian Vogley, in Stuart, Florida, getting ready to ride out Hurricane Dorian as it heads your way. Thanks so much, Dorian. Stay safe down there. Next to the 2020 presidential campaign trail, and new questions for former Vice President Joe Biden, both about his truthfulness out there on the trail and why he's had a string of slip-ups this summer where he said things that aren't entirely true. The latest was exposed yesterday by the Washington Post in a major story which found that Biden has been telling a tale about awarding a medal to a soldier in Afghanistan that simply didn't happen as he described it. Our Molly Nagel is out on the campaign trail. She was there with the vice president yesterday. He wasn't taking any questions from you, Molly, right after the story broke. Tell us again about this story. And have you heard it from the vice president? Break it down for us.
Yes, Devin. So as you mentioned, this was a story that was uncovered by the Washington Post. It originates from a stop he had in New Hampshire earlier last week, where he told a story of a service member that he pinned a medal on who tried to reject that medal because he felt he didn't deserve it because he wasn't able to save the life of a fellow service member. It's a very touching story, but the Washington Post dug into this and found that some of the details that Biden talked about in the retelling of that story were not correct. To be clear, the Biden is talking talking about a true event that happened, but Biden talked about this event happening in 2008. It actually happened in 2011, and got some of the details like the Army rank and the service branch incorrect in his retelling. Biden, as you pointed out, did not take questions from us after his last event in South Carolina last night. We tried to ask him if details mattered when he's on the campaign trail, but Biden kept walking to his car. This is a story that Biden does talk about on the campaign trail, but to my recollection, this is the first time he's talked about it on the 2020 campaign trail. The Post points out that in 2016, Biden did talk about this when he was campaigning for Hillary Clinton and for a few other candidates in that election.
Yeah, and a lot of people sort of scratching their heads on this one. I think perhaps, and you pointed this out in your report in Molly, that something that's exacerbated this perhaps is that the former vice president said repeatedly to his audiences, this is the God's honest truth, folks. So he's really underscoring that it is the truth when in fact, as the Post pointed out, it wasn't. And also in the past month, Molly, as you've been tracking, the former vice president's made a number of misstatements, everything from mixing up, which state he's in, Vermont versus New Hampshire, to whether or not, in fact, he did meet with Parkland students after that shooting when he was vice president. Of course, that shooting happened after he'd left office. And even comparing poor kids to white kids. A number of gaffes. Have any of his rivals gone after him on this yet?
Rivals tend to be steering clear of Biden as far as going after him for particular misspeaks. But Biden himself has acknowledged that he is a, quote, gaffe machine. This is something that's been a part of his kind of personality, or, his what he's known for on the trail for the majority of his career. So it's not that these slip-ups or these gaffes are something new in this election cycle. They've been happening across Biden's career. He often talks about on the campaign trail. One of his more notable moments where he talked about passing the Affordable Care Act and saying it was a big deal or something to that effect, and how embarrassed he was by that. So he acknowledges that he has a history of this, and recently he has started acknowledging to the press as well towards the back of the room, I'm not going crazy. I'm just trying to remember if we were at the medical school or if we were at the university proper, or I'm not going to cite a specific number because I don't want the press to say he couldn't remember. So he seems to be taking precautions since this string of slip-ups has happened to point out that, he doesn't intend to be incorrect.
Yeah, and his campaign pushing back on his behalf here, saying that it is the press that's making a big deal out of this. We haven't seen, to your point, Molly, I haven't seen the voters pick up on this too much just yet, or any of his rivals. So we'll see if that changes over the next couple of weeks. Molly Nagel on the Biden campaign. Thank you so much for that reporting, Molly. Next, to the continued immigration crackdown by the Trump administration here in Washington. Two new rules this week are catching the eye of immigration advocates. One involving who can become a U.S. citizen when they're born overseas. The other involving immigrants, some of them undocumented immigrants who are receiving life-saving medical treatments here in the United States. The administration says they are ending leniency for those migrants. Quinn Owen is here. He covers immigration for us. Quinn, let's start with this first issue coming out of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, which says that anyone who's born to a U.S. citizen or service member overseas might not automatically become a citizen. That caused an uproar.
Right. A lot of confusion about this policy because there are some technicalities here. It really applies to people who have gone through the naturalization process in the U.S. to become a citizen and then have lived here for less than 5 years and then go overseas and have a kid overseas. At that point, there's a few more steps that they have to take to make sure that their kid becomes a citizen.
Highly technical. The administration says a pretty small number of people that would be affected by this, but it does make you wonder if it's such a small universe, 20, 25 people, I think they said, why even make the change?
It's not exactly clear. The administration has done this before, targeted really specific groups of people that are either trying to gain citizenship or other forms of legal status in the U.S. As our Catherine Falders reported, there was some confusion at the White House about the rollout of this policy because it wasn't made entirely clear over the course of as the administration announced it, and a lot of people thought it would implicate U.S.-born citizens as well.
Perhaps more consequentially, Quinn, is this new policy by the same agency, USCIS, that said this week they won't grant leniency anymore to non-citizens who are getting medical treatment here. So people whose visas expire while they're in the hospital, they'll still need to leave or get them renewed.
Right. This is something of tragic circumstances for these families, because a lot of people who are seeking medical treatment here are in the middle of various forms of treatment in the U.S. This was a way for them to defer their possible deportation a couple of years so they could finish up with those treatments. I talked to a 14-year-old just yesterday who received one of these notices that they would have to be removed eventually from the U.S. They were told to leave in just over a month. Her and her family.
These are pictures of her, Serena Badia.
Yes, Serena Badia. She is here with her family. They're from Spain originally. She suffers from issues with her pulmonary arteries and has had to go through reconstructive surgery that they say can only be found here. And when this program was immediately discontinued by the administration, they were given notice that they would have to leave.
And what's the latest on that? Are they going to abide, or are they going to stay and receive the treatment?
So they're figuring out what to do now. The program was effectively eliminated for them, and they were referred to ICE. So there are still some options for them to avoid getting removed. One lawyer I talked to, who represents about 19 families in this circumstance, said they are planning to sue, and they're getting their materials together to figure out how to do that. But right now there are other legal avenues they might be able to pursue. As I'm told, though, from lawyers I've talked to about this, usually this option was a last-ditch effort to stay in the U.S., and these families might not have any choice. Part of a sweeping approach by USCIS to really limit and crack down on immigration to the United States, getting a lot of criticism from Democrats, but thank you for shining a spotlight. Impacts a lot of people, Quinno, and thanks so much for that. Thank you. Well, as the Trump administration continues to face blowback also for its response to violent white supremacy, a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in Ohio gave an impassioned speech on the subject this week that caught our eye. He announced the unsealing of a criminal complaint against self-avowed white supremacist James Reardon, who attended the 2017 Charlottesville Unite the Right rally. And he was arrested recently for making threatening statements against a local Jewish community center there in Ohio. After thanking law enforcement officials at a news conference, the U.S. attorney turned his comments to address head-on those white supremacists.
You don't have any right to threaten the lives and well-being of our neighbors. They have an absolute and God-given and inalienable right to live peacefully, to worship as they please, to be free from fear that they may become a target simply because of the color of their skin, the country of their birth, or the form of their prayer. Threatening to kill Jewish people, gunning down innocent Latinos on a weekend shopping trip, planning and plotting to perpetrate murders in the name of a nonsense racial theory, sitting to pray with God-fearing people who you execute moments later, those actions don't make you soldiers, they make you cowards. And law enforcement does not go to war with cowards who break the law. We arrest them and send them to prison.
Tough talk and impassioned speech from U.S. Attorney Justin Herdman, who we should say was appointed by President Trump there in Ohio. His remarks were very well received in that community, and I'm joined now by a member of the Jewish community in Youngstown, Ohio. Bonnie Dutch Birdman is the communications director for the Youngstown, Ohio Jewish Federation. Thank you so much, Bonnie, for joining us. Your community was allegedly targeted by the suspect that we just saw U.S. Attorney Herdman talking about there. What was your reaction when you heard his remarks?
Those remarks, I think, were pretty incredible. I've been doing this work for more than 20 years, and in the community relations field, we see a lot of this kind of activity, and we like to really try and balance between civil liberties and taking a hard look and a hard stance against those who would prosecute hatred. And I think these remarks were remarkable. As you said, they were really impassioned and very well received in our community.
And coming from someone who was appointed by President Trump, part of the Justice Department, obviously that this administration has received a lot of criticism for being caught flat-footed by the surge in white supremacy around the country, anti-Semitism as well. Did it surprise you that it came from the person that it did come from?
I don't think that there really is an issue on who appointed this particular U.S. attorney. We feel really comfortable and proud of the work that our local law enforcement did in concert with the federal law enforcement officials. And now this case is being picked up by the federal officials who are really taking a strong stance against going after people who would commit violence in the name of hate.
And I got to ask you about the case itself, since it certainly was a stunner to a lot of people in Youngstown. James Reardon, will remind everybody, was one of the participants. There he is, participants in the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally, which of course received so much attention, the deadly rally there. When he was arrested and this case was unsealed, what was the community's reaction? Were you surprised that this sort of thing could happen in Youngstown?
Nothing like this ever surprises us. Hatred comes in all shapes, all sizes, in a lot of different places. And, we're a small city, a quiet community, but a very close-knit community. And the reason everything went right here, meaning that nobody did get hurt, and this individual is apprehended before he can act on his hatred, is because of the close-knit relationships that our folks have in our organization, our security team, that they have with local law enforcement officials throughout the area. So, nothing surprises us, but we're glad we have those close relationships, and this was able to be addressed before anything happened.
Yeah, a lot of people thankful that this individual was caught early and arrested and now faces trial. Bonnie Deutsch-Birdman with the Youngstown, Ohio Jewish Federation. Thanks so much for coming in, Bonnie. Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And finally, on this Friday, the world's most fearsome dinosaur is now being immortalized on a forever stamp by the United States Postal Service. There you see it. The Tyrannosaurus Rex is getting its own stamp. A series of 4 different stamps unveiled this week here in Washington at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. Yes, we will say the T-Rex could be coming soon to a piece of mail near you. Our Bobby Galen was over there to talk to people about the unveiling.
The best they are is the largest predator and the creature we are celebrating today.
So the Postal Service is incredibly honored to recognize the king of the dinosaurs, and now he gets to be king of mail and king of your letters and postcards.
It's so nice to see that kids are going to enjoy this. Kids are tomorrow's leaders and scientists, right? And so it's neat to inspire them as much as possible with an interest in the natural world.
Oh, I purchased a lot. I purchased the sheet. I purchased the souvenir program. I had the ceremony sign. Definitely want to send some letters, but other stamps are going to go into the stamp album.
I don't think I've sent a letter in many, many years now. Maybe I'll send a letter home to Australia since I have these now. Yeah.
I was really honored to be a part of all of this, and I was really happy to be able to participate in the whole project.
Yes, that's good.
And Bobby joins us now. Fun assignment, Bobby. Who knew that T-Rex had so many groupies over there at the National Museum of Natural History? Tell us about these stamps. You also learned have some new technology in them that are going along with the unveiling.
That's right, Devin. The Postal Service has used a technique called lenticular printing. So coming up soon, 2 of the 4 stamps will be in 3D.
In 3D. So do you need glasses to see it, or how does that work?
No, it's just you move it in a light a little bit, and you can see it move.
All right, and they did this, of course, in front of their grand new display of the T-Rex fossil. You see it there in the corner in the hall over at the Smithsonian. Be sure to check that out here in Washington. Bobby, thanks for bringing that to us. Have a great weekend, and thank you so much for watching us this week here on ABC News Live. We'll have extensive coverage of Hurricane Dorian as it approaches the Florida coast all weekend long, including on Monday, Labor Day, so you can follow us in your pocket. Download the ABC News app. We're streaming 24/7 here on ABC News Live. You can catch the latest track from the storm, obviously the radar path as well, and we will have full meteorological team coverage here on ABC News Live as well. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Hope to see you back here next week.